My wife served me divorce papers at her party. I took back $20 million. They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes wrapped in silk and diamonds. Mine arrived beneath a chandelier in front of 400 people I'd paid to impress. The Hilton atrium glowed like a palace that night. Chandeliers spilled light across marble floors so polished you could see the outlines of your own pride staring back at you. Crystal fountains gurgled champagne in tears, and ice sculptures melted quietly under the weight of their own extravagance. Everywhere I turned, I saw faces from country clubs, boardrooms, charity galas, faces that were supposed to clap for me too. I'm Marcus Hale, 42 years old, tech entrepreneur, self-made, though the scars of that climb never show up in glossy profiles. When you've spent nights eating ramen while coding in a basement, 20 years later, people only see the tailored Tom Ford suit, not the acid reflux you bought it with. Tonight, though, wasn't supposed to be about me. It was about Clara, my wife of 8 years, daughter of Judge Winters, and the woman whose dream law firm I had bankrolled with $20 million of my own money. I walked through the crowd with that polite half-smile men like me practice in the mirror. The smile that says, yes, I'll shake your hand, but don't mistake me for your peer. Waiters passed by with trays of oysters. A string quartet sawed away at Vivaldi, as though even the music had been pre-approved by some luxury committee. Everything smelled faintly of roses and arrogance. Look, a young associate whispered as I passed. The test run husband's here. His friend snorted, the sound cutting through the hum of conversation. Test run. That word slid under my skin like a splinter. I kept moving. People like me don't flinch at insults tossed by nobodies in off-the-rack suits. But the sting lodged in me anyway, and then I saw her. Clara stood at the podium in navy silk, her dark hair pinned into a chignon so precise it looked engineered. Around her throat glimmered the diamond necklace I'd given her on our anniversary, the one that had cost more than some families make in a decade. Beside her loomed Victor Cross, her business partner, his smug grin tucked into a custom Armani. Clara's eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. For a heartbeat, something almost human flickered in them, but it vanished behind the lawyer's smile she'd rehearsed. She tapped her champagne flute with a silver spoon. The crystal chimed. Conversation died. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice smooth enough to be piped through marble. Thank you for celebrating the launch of Hale & Winters LLP. This firm represents everything I've worked for, everything I've dreamed since I was a little girl, sitting in my father's courtroom. Polite applause rose. Judge Winters himself, front row, sat with his hands folded, his face carved from stone. I felt a swell of pride despite myself. This was it. The night my investment, our investment, became real. And then Clara reached into her Chanel clutch. The envelope she drew out was plain, manila, almost laughably ordinary compared to the glitter around it. But the second she held it up, the air shifted. Before we open our doors, she continued, descending from the dais, we have one piece of business to attend to. Her heels struck the marble like a countdown. 1, 2, 3. The crowd parted, voices hushed, phones raised. I could smell her perfume Chanel number. 5 before she stopped inches from me. The smile on her lips didn't touch her eyes. Marcus, she said, loud enough for every camera. You have been generous, supportive, and I want everyone to know that the first case Hale & Winters LLP will handle is very close to my heart. She pressed the envelope into my hand. It felt heavier than paper should, weighted with betrayal. The first case, she told the crowd, is my divorce. For a moment, the world went silent. Then the gasps began, sharp intakes of breath like a choir rehearsed in cruelty. Phones flashed, capturing my expression, dissecting it for weakness. Some clapped, the brittle applause of people who never miss an opportunity to cheer power even when it reeks of blood. 8 years of marriage, 2 years of funding this temple. $20 million siphoned into office leases, signing bonuses, chandeliers, and champagne fountains. All of it reduced to a manila envelope. I didn't look at Victor, though I could feel his smirk like heat on my skin. I didn't look at Judge Winters either, though I sensed his gaze, heavy with judgment. I looked only at Clara, and she leaned close, her whisper thin and sharp. Please don't make a scene. The scene had already been written. She was just letting me play my part. So I did something no one expected. I folded the envelope once, slid it into my jacket pocket, and turned. No shouting, no begging, no broken glass of rage, just silence. I walked out, past marble floors that had cost me more than patience, past ice sculptures shaped like Lady Justice bleeding into the carpet, past the stares of people who suddenly found their champagne fascinating. Outside, the night air slapped me awake. Manhattan smelled of rain, exhaust, and freedom. I loosened my tie and laughed once low, bitter, a sound that tasted of iron. This wasn't the first time life had tried to unmake me. People thought they'd witnessed my execution. They had no idea they'd just watched my rebirth. In the taxi ride home, the envelope sat against my chest like a scar waiting to form. I didn't open it. Why give her the satisfaction of a second act? Instead, I stared out at the city lights reflected on wet pavement. Somewhere inside that ballroom, Clara was basking in applause. Believing she'd written my ending, she'd forgotten something fundamental. I don't play games, I don't know how to win. My driver asked gently, rough night, boss? Educational, I said, and I meant it. By the time I reached my apartment, my mind was already inventorying numbers, contracts, clauses. My humiliation was real, yes, but humiliation is only temporary. Paperwork is permanent. Tonight, Clara had announced a case. Tomorrow, I would remind her what court really looks like. The thing about walking away is people think it's surrender. They don't realize sometimes it's reconnaissance. I left the Hilton with my head high, envelope pressed like a brand against my chest. Outside, the rain made the city glisten, as if even Manhattan wanted to wash itself clean of the spectacle inside. Every step I took away from that ballroom felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Heavy with betrayal. Lighter with the certainty that I was no longer pretending. The doorman of my building greeted me like nothing had happened. That's the Manhattan way. Your life can detonate across social media, but the man paid to open your door will still call you sir with the same calm detachment. I gave him a nod, rode the elevator up, and let myself into an apartment designed to look like permanence. Tonight, it felt like stage scenery. I tossed my jacket on a chair, but not the envelope, that I carried into my study, a room more honest than the marriage I just lost. Floor-to-ceiling windows gave me Central Park at night, but the real view was the bookshelf custom-built, walnut, and hiding the one thing that had kept me sane these past years. Behind the third shelf on the right was a panel. Behind the panel, my safe. Not the kind you stuff passports in, but a vault, fireproof and waterproof, designed for one purpose, insurance. I punched in the code, the lock clicked, and the door swung open with a weighty groan that felt like truth exhaling. Inside, binders, thick, labeled, and meticulous. Clara thought I was just her financier. Victor thought I was her fool. Both of them never understood that money is only power when it leaves fingerprints. Mine left a trail so detailed, a blind accountant could follow it. I pulled out the first binder. Hale and Winters, LLP, Financial Structure. Each page was a story written in black ink, the kind of story that courts don't care about until you present it with a lawyer's precision. Initial seed money, $5 million. Documented, not as a gift, but as a loan with performance clauses. Office lease, $200,000 deposit, contract signed in my name. The mahogany conference table Clara bragged about, I had receipts showing it was mine. I flipped page after page, my humiliation from earlier shrinking beneath the weight of paper. The chandeliers? Mine. The signing bonuses for those hotshot associates? Structured agreements tied directly to the firm's solvency, my solvency. The software systems Victor had been so proud of presenting? Purchased under accounts I controlled. They thought they'd left me standing naked in a ballroom. They didn't realize I owned the roof, the lights, and the champagne bubbles themselves. I poured myself a glass of Macallan, the 30-year bottle I kept for nights that felt like tombstones. The burn down my throat steadied me. Across the desk lay the envelope Clara had handed me like it was a death sentence.
Divorce papers. 8 years reduced to legal jargon. I didn't even need to open it to know what it said. Dissolution, division, dismissal. But Clara had made one mistake. She assumed public humiliation was the same as legal power. That's the arrogance of lawyers.
They mistake theater for strategy. I sat back and let the city fill the silence. Rain ticked against the windows. Traffic hissed below. My reflection in the glass looked tired, yes, but sharper than it had in years. Ask yourself this. When someone pulls the rug from under you, do you fall, or do you notice you're standing on the foundation they forgot you poured? I thought of Claire's face at the podium, polished, pitiless. I thought of Victor's smirk, like a man who believed he'd inherited a kingdom without realizing the deed was never signed. I thought of the crowd's applause, the hashtags probably already trending. Hashtag power move, hashtag divorce drama. Let them laugh. By Monday morning, laughter would be expensive. I opened another binder silent partner agreements. There it was, in crisp black ink, clause 7.3, material breach triggers. Claire never read it. She'd been too busy picking out office art. Victor never asked. He thought charm could substitute for scrutiny. But I had written it, reviewed it, and waited for the day I might need it. Material breach. You don't need to be a lawyer to understand what it means when your spouse serves you divorce papers in public while your money fuels her empire. I ran a finger along the text. Not angry now, just calm. Revenge wasn't rage. Revenge was arithmetic. The clock struck midnight. In my apartment, silence grew dense, thick with calculation. I looked down at the envelope again. I'd been served papers. Clara thought she'd served judgment, but judgment is slow. Paper, though, it waits. And mine was ready. Tomorrow would not be about humiliation. It would be about reclamation. I finished my drink, closed the safe, and leaned back in my chair. Somewhere across the city, Clara and Victor were toasting their victory. They believed I had walked away defeated. What they didn't know is that walking away was just the first move. And I had a vault full of moves left. There's a reason casinos don't let players count cards. When you know the math, you stop playing. You start winning. By Sunday morning, my humiliation had hardened into clarity. I woke before the city's noise, before the dog walkers and the first delivery trucks, and sat in my study with the binders spread like maps of a battlefield. The manila envelope, her gift of betrayal, sat unopened to my left. To my right, contracts and receipts whispered the truth Clara never bothered to see. I'd been her husband on paper, but in ink and signatures, I was something else. Her creditor, her landlord, her silent partner with teeth sharper than any courtroom speech. I pulled out the corporate partnership agreement. Section 7.3, silent partner withdrawal clause. It was almost poetic, the way it lay buried among boilerplate legalese, the kind of section an eager attorney would skim past with a yawn. Clara hadn't cared to read it. Victor wouldn't have known how. But I had drafted it with the precision of a surgeon. Material breach of fiduciary responsibility, I read aloud, my voice the only sound in the room. I smiled. Claire's little performance in front of the city's elite wasn't just betrayal. It was legal dynamite. I leaned back, sipping coffee strong enough to burn away doubt. Revenge wasn't a plan yet. It was an outline, a skeleton waiting for flesh. And I had all the material I needed. The safe still gaped open beside me. I reached deeper and pulled out the next binder. Operational expenditures, receipts and accounts. Vendors, caterers, software contracts, leases, all flowing from my accounts. I remembered signing the checks, Clara kissing my cheek absentmindedly before running off to dinner with clients. I remembered the glow she wore after meetings with Victor, a glow I had mistaken for professional triumph. Every smile had been camouflage, every late night, a rehearsal for this. I traced my finger over the vendor list. Catering company, florist, event planner, audio-visual rentals. Each invoice stamped paid by me, and all of them linked back to the firm's payment system, a system I still had access to. A thought crystallized. I didn't need to storm her party with shouting. I didn't need to rip the papers up in her face. My revenge would be quieter. Numbers moving through wires, payments suspended, payroll hiccuping, vendors calling, chaos not in fists, but in finance. I closed the binder and replaced it in the safe, pulling instead a small black leather notebook. Inside were passwords, encrypted codes to accounts Clara thought she controlled. I smiled at the memory of setting up backup credentials. She had laughed, teased me about paranoia. Funny thing about paranoia, it only looks like madness until it pays off. I logged into the firm's online banking portal. The interface was familiar, smug in its corporate efficiency. Operating capital, $847,000. Reserve fund, $1.2 million. Expense accounts for Victor's lavish dinners masquerading as client meetings. All sitting there like unguarded treasure seas. I didn't move a cent yet. Instead, I began drafting adjustments. Automatic payments? Suspended. Vendor invoices? Frozen for verification payroll system? Scheduled for manual review. Subtle, invisible to the untrained eye, but enough to turn Monday morning into a battlefield. I sat back and let the satisfaction roll over me. Clara thought she'd exiled me. Victor thought he'd humiliated me. By dawn tomorrow, they discovered that their empire had termites chewing at its foundations. I closed the laptop, poured myself a second coffee, and looked out the window. Central Park was waking, joggers and dog walkers tracing the edges of the green. Normal lives, normal betrayals. My life was neither. Ask yourself, what's the real difference between love and investment? Both demand faith, both demand time, and both can bankrupt you. The only question is whether you kept the receipts. I had. I thought back to the party. Claire's smile, Victor's arrogance, the applause of people who believed they were witnessing my downfall. Let them laugh. By tomorrow, that laughter would curdle into panic. By the end of the week, they'd understand that Marcus Hale was not the test-run husband. I was the storm they never saw coming. The clock ticked. The safe stood open, binders like soldiers waiting for orders. And me? I wasn't broken. I was busy. Because sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one who leaves quietly, goes home, and starts counting. Counting. Whiskey tastes different after betrayal. It's not smoother or harsher. It's sharper. Like every swallow is filing your teeth into something meant to bite back. By late Sunday night, the city had gone quiet, or as quiet as Manhattan ever gets. From my study window, Central Park looked like a black ocean, its lamplights tiny buoys in the dark. I sat in the leather chair that had outlasted 2 apartments and 1 marriage, the Macallan bottle half drained beside me. On the desk, binders fanned out like evidence exhibits in a case no one else knew existed. I should have felt broken. Any man would, after what Clara had done. But here's the truth. Humiliation, when it's public enough, burns clean. The shame evaporates. What's left is clarity. 8 years of marriage had been theater, I realized. She played the brilliant lawyer building her empire. I played the husband who bankrolled her dream. Everyone applauded the performance, but the stage props, the marble floors, the mahogany desks, the designer gowns, were mine. I thought of Clara at the podium, voice smooth, smile flawless. The first case Hale and Winters will handle is my divorce. The audacity wasn't just legal, it was theatrical. She turned my marriage into a headline, a hashtag. I laughed then, dark, bitter. Betrayal isn't just about love. It's about someone cashing in your belief like a check they never intended to honor. I poured another 2 fingers of Macallan, let it burn, and flipped open the silent partner agreement again. There it was, Section 7.3, glowing like scripture in black ink. Material breach of fiduciary duty. She had handed me my trigger clause wrapped in humiliation. Victor's face surfaced in my mind, the smirk he wore at the party, as if he were already trying on my suits in his imagination. Arrogant men always mistake access for ownership. He thought Clara was his partner now, in law and in bed, and that made the empire his. But Victor had never built anything. He'd only ever inherited opportunities, riding the wave of other people's risk. Men like him confuse wealth with wisdom. Pathetic, I muttered into the empty room. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and let the memories play. Clara kissing me absent-mindedly while I signed the checks. Victor joining us for dinners where I paid and he toasted. Nights she came home late, glowing with client victories, while my gut whispered another truth I refused to hear. Love had blinded me, yes, but not anymore. The city hummed faintly outside. Inside, the safe stood ajar, its steel mouth gaping, binders stacked like soldiers awaiting orders. My humiliation had become fuel, and fuel demands fire. Here's the thing. No one tells you about revenge. It's not rage. Rage is sloppy. Revenge is arithmetic. Line items, contracts, clauses. I wasn't going to smash plates or send angry texts. I was going to do what I did best, turn numbers into weapons. I booted up my laptop again. Fingers steady now. Accessed the firm's accounts, scrolling through payroll schedules, vendor invoices, lease payments. Each number pulsed like a vein, waiting for pressure. I could freeze, suspend, redirect. Not a single gavel needed. I hovered over the suspend option for vendor payments. One click, and the caterer who'd poured champagne over my humiliation wouldn't see a cent. Another click, and the florists, the photographers, the AV team, all of them, would start dialing Clara and Victor on Monday, demanding money. I smiled. Chaos. Delivered quietly through a bank portal. I didn't click yet. Timing matters. Monday morning, when their associates expected paychecks, when vendors expected wires, that's when the walls would creak. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and realized something else. I wasn't just dismantling Clara's dream. I was reclaiming my own narrative. For years, I'd been reduced to Clara's husband, the quiet financier. Now I was writing my own chapter, one she wouldn't survive unscathed. Ask yourself, what would you do if the person you trusted most turned your devotion into a stage prop for their ambition? Would you walk away? Would you forgive? Or would you count every dollar, every clause, every overlooked signature and turn it into the blade they never saw coming? The whiskey glass felt cool in my hand. The rain outside had stopped. In the reflection of the window, my face looked unfamiliar, harder, sharper. Tomorrow, Claire and Victor would wake believing they were untouchable. By noon, they'd understand what it meant to build your kingdom on someone else's foundation. I raised my glass toward the skyline. To clarity, I whispered, and drank. Revenge doesn't always wear brass knuckles.
Sometimes it wears a login screen. Monday dawned with a pale light seeping through my blinds, and for the first time in days, I felt rested. Clarity does that. Humiliation had burned itself out. In its place was something colder, steadier, precision.
I brewed coffee strong enough to scrape the lining off my stomach and sat down at my desk. The safe stood open beside me, binders stacked neatly, their spines labeled like scripture. Each one was a chapter in Clara's downfall. But the real weapon was glowing on my laptop screen, the firm's banking portal. Operating capital, $847,000.
Reserve fund, $1.2 million. Expense accounts bleeding money into Victor's dinners. Claire's dresses, launch parties that had been my crucifixion stage. They thought these numbers were theirs. What they didn't understand was that numbers don't have loyalty. They answer only to access. And I had access. I started small. Vendors first. The catering company that had poured champagne into crystal fountains while my marriage drowned. Payment suspended pending verification. The florist who sculpted roses into centerpieces under chandeliers I paid for, frozen. The event planners, the AV rentals, even the valet company, all invoices quietly rerouted to limbo. Each click was a scalpel, not a hammer. My goal wasn't destruction, it was disruption. Enough to make Monday morning bleed confusion all over Clara's pristine new empire. Then payroll. My fingers hovered for a moment. Associates and paralegals, some ambitious, some arrogant, all expecting their direct deposits to hit by 9 a.m. I toggled the switch. Manual review required. To them, it would look like a glitch. To Clara and Victor, it would look like incompetence. To me, it looked like justice. I sipped coffee, watching lines of code obey my hand, like soldiers taking orders. Each adjustment was small enough not to trip alarms yet, but heavy enough to make phones start buzzing in their offices by mid-morning. The reserve fund was next. $1.2 million set aside for stability. I tagged it for compliance review. It would sit frozen, untouchable, while creditors lined up at their door, like locking a fire extinguisher in a glass case just as the flames catch. I leaned back, exhaled, and felt the weight of satisfaction settle in. This wasn't rage anymore. Rage was loud, messy, the kind of thing people film for gossip. This was quiet, surgical, the kind of thing no one sees until the structure collapses. I thought of Clara at that podium, her voice ringing with triumph, the crowd gasping, phones flashing as she handed me the envelope. She believed she had written my ending. What she'd really done was trigger the fine print she never bothered to read. Victor's smirk rose in my memory, smug and oily. He probably thought Monday would bring him power lunches and congratulatory calls. Instead, it would bring unpaid staff and vendors at his throat. Let's see how long charm lasts when your employees can't pay rent. I closed the laptop and poured a second cup of coffee. Outside, the city was waking, horns blaring, people rushing. Somewhere across town, Claire was stepping into her firm's glass doors, heels clicking, smile plastered on. She'd see bouquets on desks, associates settling in, phones blinking with messages. For a few precious minutes, she'd still believe her empire was intact. And then the calls would start.
I imagined it. Paralegals murmuring. My paycheck didn't hit. Vendors demanding invoices. The accountant sweating bullets as systems refused to process. Claire's face tightening.
Victor's excuses fumbling. The beauty of it was timing. Claire had wanted a public spectacle, my humiliation in front of Manhattan's elite. I wanted the opposite, a private implosion, one that would leave her scrambling behind closed doors, her empire rotting from within. I picked up the envelope, the divorce papers, and set it back down. It wasn't urgent. Paperwork waits. Panic doesn't. And ask yourself, if someone stole your pride in public, would you shout for sympathy? Or would you sit at a keyboard smiling as you rewrote their future digit by digit? The clock on the wall ticked past 9 a.m.
Somewhere in Midtown, chaos was clocking in. I raised my coffee in a silent toast. To glitches, I said. And to timing. Because revenge, when it's done right, doesn't roar. It hums. Monday mornings are supposed to smell like burnt coffee and ambition. At Hale & Winters, LLP, it smelled like panic. The first cracks came at 8:47 a.m., when the payroll system choked. Associates checking their bank apps saw zeros where there should have been rent money. Paralegals whispered at their desks, brows furrowed, hitting refresh as if sheer willpower could conjure deposits. By 9:05, the whispers had become raised voices. By 9:15, Claire's office door was shut, Victor's was locked, and Sophie, their assistant barely a year out of college, was juggling 3 phones and a panic attack. Vendors joined the chorus. The catering company, still waiting on their 6-figure invoice from the launch party, called every extension they could find. The florist sent a terse email marked final notice. The AV rental company threatened legal action before the day was half over. Each demand carried the same sting. Where's our money? Inside the conference room, Claire's partners sat stiff as corpses. Elaine Porter, the senior counsel they'd poached from a white shoe firm, tapped her pen against a spreadsheet and muttered, "This doesn't happen. Payroll doesn't just vanish." Victor, always the smooth talker, tried his usual charm. "It's a banking error," he said, voice pitched for calm. "Systems glitch all the time." But the sweat darkening his collar betrayed him. "It's not a glitch when every vendor freezes at once," Elaine shot back. Claire pressed her fingers to her temples. The weekend's triumph had curdled into a migraine. "I'll call the bank," she said, as though the weight of her name could bend the system. But the bank only confirmed what she already feared. The accounts were flagged for compliance review. No explanation, no timeline, just silence. By noon, the firm had become a war zone. Phones shrilled without pause. Associates crowded the hallways, muttering about updating their resumes. Victor snapped at Sophie, who was on her 3rd cup of gas station coffee and shaking so badly she could barely dial. Clara paced her office, heels carving grooves into the carpet. And me? I sat in my apartment sipping espresso and listening to my phone buzz. 57 missed calls by lunch. Clara, Victor, even Judge Winters. I let them all go to voicemail. There's a unique pleasure in silence when the other side is screaming. At 2:30, my doorman rang. "Mr. Hale? There's a young woman here, says she's from Hale & Winters. Looks urgent, Sophie." When I opened the door, she looked like exhaustion in human form. Hair in a messy bun, mascara smudged, clutching a folder like it was a flotation device. Her eyes were wide, rimmed with panic. "Mr. Hale," she stammered. "Thank you for seeing me. I know this is irregular, but..." Her voice cracked. "The firm is collapsing. Payroll failed. Vendors are threatening lawsuits. Investors are calling nonstop. Judge Winters is furious. And Clara keeps saying it's just a glitch I let her spill. The words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. Finally, I asked, calm as a surgeon. And what do you think, Sophie? She bit her lip, trembling. I think computer glitches don't usually involve $20 million disappearing. Smart girl, smarter than her bosses. I walked to my desk, pulled out a cream-colored envelope from my drawer, and handed it to her. My terms, my clock, my quiet war. Deliver this to Clara, I said. Not Victor, not the receptionist, into her hands. Tell her she has 24 hours to respond. Not a minute more, Sophie clutched the envelope like it might burn her. What's in it? The only way out, I said simply. She nodded, eyes wide, and backed toward the door. They won't like this. They don't have to like it, I told her. They just have to read it. When the door closed, I poured myself another espresso and looked out at the city. Somewhere across town, Claire was drowning in the chaos she'd built on my dime. Victor was probably screaming into a phone. The empire they thought untouchable was crumbling in less than 24 hours. Ask yourself, if you could destroy someone without raising your voice, wouldn't you? If the only tool you needed was patience and paperwork, wouldn't you wield it? The clock ticked on my wall, 24 hours. And for Clara, the countdown had just begun. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of clarity only chaos can bring. The calls hadn't stopped all night. Clara, Victor, even Judge Winters. Each message more frantic than the last. I didn't answer a single one. Silence is leverage, and I wasn't about to waste it. At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into the marble lobby of Hale & Winters LLP. The same lobby I'd toured with Clara 2 years earlier, when she'd gushed about the brass fixtures and the gravitas it would impress upon clients. Now it reeked of desperation. The receptionist, a young woman whose name I'd never learned, looked up at me with wide eyes, like she was seeing a ghost. "They're waiting for you, Mr. Hale," she stammered. Of course they were. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was smooth, but the tension was palpable the moment the doors opened. The hum of ambition that once filled this office had been replaced by the frantic pitch of survival. Associates whispered in clusters, phones rang unanswered. The air tasted metallic, like fear. I pushed open the mahogany doors to the conference room. It was the same room where Clara had once toasted a new empire with champagne I had paid for. Today, it felt like a morgue. Elaine Porter sat at the far end of the table, dark circles under her eyes, clutching a coffee she wasn't drinking. Two junior associates whispered near the window, their laptops open to job sites instead of case files. The firm's accountant had spreadsheets spread out like tarot cards, his hands trembling as he adjusted his glasses. And at the head of the table sat Clara. Her navy suit was immaculate, her hair pinned just so, but the mask was cracking. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her hands clasped too tightly on the table. She looked less like the triumphant attorney from Friday night, and more like someone clinging to the wreckage of a ship she'd steered straight into rocks. The only empty chair was Victor's. "Where's your partner?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from Clara with deliberate calm. Clara's jaw tightened. "He's indisposed. Personal matters, translation, hiding, probably with a bottle of scotch and a stack of unpaid invoices." "Well then," I said, pulling a thick folder from my briefcase and laying it on the table. "We'll proceed without him." I spread the documents across the table like cards in a poker game. Each page was another nail in the coffin. Partnership dissolution agreements, asset recovery forms, employment termination notices, and the masterpiece, a restructuring proposal that would make Gordon Gekko weep with admiration. "As you all know," I began, my tone calm, clinical, "the firm is experiencing what we might call liquidity issues." "That's an understatement," Elaine muttered. Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. "Marcus, if this is about withdrawing your investment—" "This isn't about withdrawal," I cut her off. "This is about control." I handed copies of my terms around the table. The silence that followed was suffocating. Papers rustled, eyes widened, and slowly, heads lifted to stare at Clara, like she'd dragged them into a nightmare they hadn't signed up for. "You want Clara to resign as managing partner?" Elaine finally asked, her voice low. "I want Clara," I said evenly, "to resign from any operational role in this firm. She may remain as counsel, but she will have no decision-making authority, no client contact, and no access to finances." Clara's eyes flashed. "You can't—" "I can. And I will." A junior associate raised his hand timidly. "And Victor?" "Terminated," I replied. "Effective immediately. No severance, no references. A 5-year non-compete. If he tries to practice law in New York, he'll wish he hadn't." Clara's hand trembled against the tabletop. "Marcus, you're destroying everything we built." "Everything I built," I corrected. "You played lawyer." I ran a business. I stood, walking to the window, looking out at the skyline Clara once thought she would conquer. "My $20 million will be repaid in structured installments over the next 10 years. I'll assume 2 permanent board seats, including Director of Financial Oversight, with veto power on any expenditure above $10,000. That's," Elaine swallowed, "that's essentially a hostile takeover." I turned, letting them see the smile I hadn't worn since Friday night. "No, a hostile takeover is when someone steals your company. This is what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you and discover it has teeth." I placed a pen in front of Clara. "Sign." For a long moment, she just stared at it. 8 years of marriage, 2 years of empire building, every ounce of ambition in her bones, reduced to the scratch of ink on paper. Her eyes shimmered with something between rage and grief. "If I sign this," she whispered, "I'll be nothing more than an employee in my own firm." I leaned down until my face was level with hers. "Clara, this stopped being your firm the moment you served me divorce papers at a party I paid for. This isn't a negotiation, it's a settlement." The silence stretched until it snapped. With a trembling hand, Clara signed. One by one, the others followed. Each signature was another nail hammered into the coffin of Hale and Winters. When the last pen hit the table, I gathered the papers into my folder. "Congratulations," I said softly. "You're all still employed. You'll keep your salaries, your benefits. The only thing that changes is who actually runs this firm." I turned toward the door, but Clara's voice stopped me. "Marcus," she said, her voice small, almost broken. "Was this always your plan?" I looked back at her, this woman I had once loved, who I had trusted with my heart and my fortune. "No," I said truthfully. "The plan was to love you, to support your dreams, to grow old together, but plans change when people do stupid things." And with that, I walked out, leaving Clara to stare at the wreckage of her empire while mine rose from its ashes. 2 weeks after I walked out of that conference room with Clara's signature drying on the page, the city felt different, quieter, though maybe that was just inside me. Revenge, once complete, doesn't roar. It exhales. Clara's empire still stood on paper. The brass nameplate on Madison Avenue still gleamed. The reception desk still smelled of lilies. But everyone in the legal community knew the truth. Whispers spread faster than filings. The managing partner had been stripped, her lover banished, and the husband she'd tried to humiliate now sat in the only chair that mattered. People called it a corporate coup, though I never liked that word. Coups are messy. This had been surgical. And yet victory felt hollow. Owning Clara's empire wasn't the same as building my own. Revenge gives you clarity, but not purpose. That's how I found myself standing in front of a weathered townhouse in Brooklyn one damp Thursday morning. The sign over the door read Phoenix Legal Collective, letters peeling, paint flaking, ambition hanging by threads. The building looked like it had been rescued from a fire sale, which in a way, it had. Inside, chaos ruled. Mismatched chairs, desks stacked with case files, whiteboards scrawled with arrows, and notes that looked more like battle plans than legal strategy. But there was a hum to the place, a pulse that Hale and Winters had never possessed. Not polished arrogance, something rawer, purpose. "Mr. Hale?" a voice called. She was younger than I expected. Lydia Torres, founder of Phoenix, looked barely 30. Hair pulled back in a ponytail, jeans worn thin at the knees, blazer one size too big. But her eyes burned with intensity, the kind you can't fake. "Thanks for coming," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that meant business. "We don't usually get visitors with your kind of resume." "I don't usually visit places like this," I admitted, glancing around. "But maybe that's the point." She laughed, sharp and genuine. The sound cut through the fatigue hanging in the air. "Come on, let me show you what we're fighting for." We toured cramped rooms where overworked lawyers handled wrongful evictions, immigration hearings, wage theft cases, desks piled with manila folders, phones ringing off hooks, interns running on caffeine and righteous fury. Nothing matched, but everything mattered. "This is our war room," Lydia said, gesturing to a conference table scratched with decades of use. "We handle 40 cases at any given time. Families about to lose homes, workers cheated out of paychecks, people steamrolled by corporations who assume no one will fight back." Her passion was contagious. For years, I'd invested in marble and chandeliers. Here was someone investing in people. "What's your success rate?" I asked. "Depends how you measure it," she said. "If you mean winning outright, about 60%. If you mean keeping people from being crushed completely, closer to 90s. I stopped in front of a bulletin board plastered with thank you letters, newspaper clippings, even a crayon drawing from a child whose family hadn't been evicted. I felt something stir in me I hadn't expected. Not pride, not revenge, something simpler. Respect. In her office, a glorified closet with a cracked window, Lydia leveled with me. "We're broke. Not cash flow broke. End of the line broke. 6 weeks of operating capital left, maybe less if the heating system dies before spring." She didn't flinch when she said it. She wasn't asking for pity. She was stating fact, like a general briefing a superior officer before battle. "What would you do with real money?" I asked. She blinked. "Define real." 10 million, I said. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, testing me. "With 10 million, we'd expand to all 5 boroughs. Hire 20 more attorneys. Train law students who can't afford to work for free. Put a clinic in every neighborhood where people need representation but can't get it. And then we'd start scaring the hell out of landlords and corporations who think poor people are disposable." I pulled out my checkbook. Yes, I still carried one. Some things deserve ink, not digital transfers. I wrote the number, tore the page, and slid it across her desk. Lydia stared at it like it might combust. "You're serious?" Completely. Tears welled in her eyes, though she tried to blink them back. "You just saved us." "No," I said, standing. "You saved me. I've been busy tearing things down. Maybe it's time to build something worth keeping." As I stepped back into the Brooklyn air, I realized revenge wasn't the end of my story. It was only the clearing of the ground. The Phoenix Collective wasn't marble or chandeliers. It was raw, chaotic, alive. And maybe that's exactly what I needed. Claire had built an empire to impress the city. I was about to help build one that might change it. If revenge is arithmetic, then reputation is poetry fragile, easily twisted, and impossible to reclaim once the wrong words are spoken. Claire had humiliated me in public. Now it was her turn to face the truth in the same arena. She asked for the meeting. Cafe Orpheus, an Upper West Side neutral ground where divorced couples hashed out custody agreements over overpriced avocado toast. The kind of place where appearances mattered more than flavor. Typical Clara. I arrived on time. She was already there. Navy suit, crisp, makeup meticulous. But beneath the polish, she looked smaller, frayed. Success had once clung to her like perfume. Now it had evaporated, leaving only the scent of desperation. A legal pad sat open in front of her, bullet points scrawled in neat lines. "Marcus," she said, forcing a smile. "Thank you for coming. We need to discuss our public narrative." I stirred cream into my coffee slowly, letting silence do the heavy lifting. "Our narrative?" Her jaw tensed. "The press. The legal community. We can't let rumors define us. I've drafted a statement." She slid her laptop toward me, on screen. A press release so polished it squeaked. "Hale Legal Partners announces leadership transition." According to this masterpiece, Clara was stepping back to focus on strategic client relations, while I had assumed a guiding role to ensure operational efficiency. Not a word about betrayal. Not a word about Victor. I read it all, then looked at her. "This is fiction. It's damage control," she said tightly. "It protects both of us." "No, Clara. It protects you." Her hands trembled slightly on the tabletop. "If we tell the truth, it will destroy me. Truth doesn't destroy. I said, voice steady. Lies do. And we've had enough of those. For 2 hours, we rewrote her fairy tale. I cut away every euphemism, every passive verb. When she typed, Marcus Hale provided support, I made her write Marcus Hale funded the firm. When she softened to personal missteps, I pressed her until she admitted my choices jeopardized the investment and the firm's stability. She flinched every time honesty bled through the screen, but she kept typing. Finally, I asked the question she dreaded. And Victor? Her fingers froze. What about him? You're going to mention that you had an affair with your business partner while spending your husband's money to fund both your firm and your romance. Or are we pretending that's irrelevant? Her eyes glistened, but she typed. Not his name, not the sordid details, but enough. I allowed personal relationships to compromise professional judgment. By the time we were finished, the statement was unrecognizable. No spin, no polish. Just truth sharp enough to cut. Clara stared at it like it was her own obituary. This will ruin me, she whispered. No, I corrected. This will save what little integrity you have left. You should have led with honesty. Instead, you're crawling to it as a last resort. She scheduled the release for 9 a.m. the next morning. The sound of her finger tapping the trackpad was like a gavel hitting wood. When I stood to leave, she reached across the table, touching my hand for the first time in months. Marcus. I never wanted it to end this way. I met her eyes, steady and cold. Wanting and working are two different things. You wanted applause. I wanted partnership. That's the difference outside. The city bustled, indifferent to her collapse. Somewhere, Victor was already irrelevant. His name scrubbed from documents, his career circling the drain. Claire had chosen to weaponize narrative against me. Now narrative would bury her.
The truth was scheduled, and when it went live, it would spread faster than gossip and hit harder than any courtroom verdict. 6 months after the implosion, I was in my new apartment on the Upper West Side when the FedEx courier buzzed. No marble floors this time.
No curated art on the walls. Just sunlight, books, and space that felt like mine. The envelope bore no return address, but the handwriting stopped me cold. Clara's. I poured myself a plain black coffee, no $200 scotch this time, and opened it. Just one page, written on drugstore paper. Marcus, I moved to Portland 3 months ago. Everyone knows by now that I'm persona non grata, east of the Hudson. I work at a nonprofit clinic, helping people fight evictions and immigration cases. The pay is awful. The office is in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax prep service. And I've never been happier. I understand now what you tried to tell me. The difference between being famous and being respected. Between building something real and building something that only looks good in magazines. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be someone different. Someone real. Clara. I folded it carefully, slid it into the drawer with my tax returns, insurance papers, and other things that mattered once, but no longer defined me. There was no anger left, just a muted sadness for the woman she might have been if she hadn't confused applause for purpose. Funny thing, the Clara who wrote that letter, the one working in a strip mall, scraping to help people, was the woman I fell in love with 10 years ago. The woman I would have supported forever. But that woman had vanished years ago, replaced by someone chasing headlines. Portland might give her a second chance. Or maybe not. It wasn't my problem anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from Camille Roos, the Columbia ethics professor who'd turned out to be sharper and kinder than anyone I'd met in years. Dinner at 7? Ethiopian place downtown? Bring the good wine? I smiled. For the first time in forever, the future felt like something to build, not just survive. The Phoenix Legal Collective was thriving. Lydia Torres had opened 3 new offices, hired dozens of scrappy young lawyers, and won a class action case that forced a property management company to return millions to tenants. That victory didn't glitter like chandeliers. It fed children, paid rent, kept roofs overhead. And me? I was teaching seminars on finance and ethics at Columbia, building something cleaner than the empire Clara had torched. As the sun dipped low, painting the city gold, I poured myself a glass of ordinary wine good, but not ostentatious, and thought about the journey. Clara thought the best revenge was humiliation. She was wrong. The best revenge is building a life so good their betrayal becomes irrelevant. And that, finally, was my victory. Thanks for watching to the end. If this story hit home, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next full story. Drop a comment, walk away, or strike back.